What's up, everybody? Welcome to Twins Daily Offseason Live. My name is Nick Nelson of twinsdaily.com, and today I am excited to talk about free agents. We're diving into the free agent pool, folks. We're going to take a look at some targets that we like for the Twins at a couple of positions that they're going to be shopping at here. So catcher and infield are going to be our focus for today. As I mentioned, my name is Nick Nelson of twinsdaily.com, and joined here today by a couple of Twins Daily writers. We've got Mr. David Youngs in the building. David, how are you doing tonight?
You know what? I'm doing all right. My name's actually Randy Dobnik. Trying out a little special facial hair for my 23rd birthday. It's my Jordan birthday. That's not Michael Jordan with the Chicago White Sox. Hopefully it's the Chicago Bulls type of year. Hopefully my year's not comparable to his time with the White Sox. But I'm doing good.
Well, happy birthday, man. We're all wishing you a very happy birthday, and thank you for joining us here on this special day to talk some Twins off season.
Absolutely. No place I'd rather be.
Andrew Gibo joining us from downtown Minneapolis. Andrew, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well. And just because it's your birthday, David, I'm not going to go easy on you when I pick apart your picks here. So,
I would expect nothing less.
Excited to get underway here with a hopefully more civil debate than the alternative one tonight.
Yes. We're looking to give you a little bit of a more watchable alternative than whatever's taking place on that debate stage elsewhere. So we are just going to talk about, as I mentioned, free agents. So the show is Twins Daily Offseason Live. We've been doing this. It's a twice a week show that we do here to cover the Twins offseason from all angles. And what we do here is just we hold these shows. We have these conversations live between us, the Twins Daily writers. We love to bring in the comments from the people who are watching. Missy Doll Young says, "Happy birthday, David. Love, Mom." Wow, you already got a shout out from Mom within the first minute of the show here. So nice job there, David.
Too, Mom.
Oh, that's really sweet. So in the first few episodes, you can go back and watch these. You can go to twinsdaily.com. We've covered the Twins payroll situation to kind of lay out the parameters we think they're going to be working with this offseason. We've laid out some of the Twins' own free agent players who are hitting the market, whether they're likely to stay or go. And we've looked at, most recently, arbitration, some of the arbitration cases. So we've kind of got a lay of what the Twins have to spend, roughly all kind of guesswork as we go into this very uncertain, ambiguous offseason. And we have a little bit of an idea of who they might try to keep via free agency and arbitration. But now we're going to turn our attention to the open market. And we're going to talk about a couple positions that, as we'll talk about, are definitely areas of need. I don't know how significant the splashes will be that the Twins make at these positions, but they're definitely, I think, going to make some moves. So we're looking forward to diving into that here tonight. So I'm just bringing up here a broad overview here, basically, of some of the free agents that are out there on the market. This is not a comprehensive list by any means, but just to give you guys a very broad idea of the landscape that the Twins are looking at these positions. At the catcher position, it's a pretty good offseason for catchers. There's some good names at the top of that list. You got James McCann from the White Sox, who I think is clearly going to sign elsewhere now that they've got Yasmani Grandal in the mix. JT Realmuto, one of the better catchers in the league, kind of a popular Twins trade target before he got shipped from Miami to Philly. Yadier Molina, possibly a Hall of Famer, an older guy. I'd be surprised if he goes anywhere other than St. Louis, but we'll see. He's out there. The now former Twin Alex Avila and a more former Twin Jason Castro both out there. You've got Robinson Chirinos, Tyler Flowers, Austin Romine, Stephen Voigt, another former Twin, Kurt Suzuki, Matt Wieters, Jeff Mathis. Some of the names out there, a lot of veteran guys, and I think as we'll discuss, the Twins are probably going to be looking for someone with some experience to complement what they have. We'll talk also about the infielders shortly, just to give you a kind of a broad overview of what's available there. Again, some names at the top that I don't think the Twins are going to be really looking at too hard. These are starters, maybe even all-star starters. DJ LeMahieu, Andrelton Simmons, Didi Gregorius, Justin Turner, who of course performing right now in the World Series for the Dodgers. But as you get down, there's some targets, some possible utility guys, some possible backup types that the Twins could really take a look at. Guys like Jurickson Profar, Tommy Listella, Kike Hernandez, Jonathan VR, a bunch of names here that we'll dive into some. The way we're going to do this is we've all kind of picked out a few names that we like. Each of us chose one catcher that we like for the Twins and a couple different infielders to fill these spots that the Twins need to address. And we're going to make our cases, break them down, maybe debate them a little bit, as is the spirit of the night, a little debate, a spirited debate, as it were. And so I think it should be a fun show. And as I mentioned, if you're watching us on YouTube or Twitter or Facebook, please feel free to comment. If you like any of the names on the list you're seeing here, throw them out there. We'll talk about them. If you have any thoughts on the guys we're talking about, if you want to knock someone's bad argument, hey, bring it on. We're ready for it. All right. So we're going to dive right in. I see already Josiah says, I would love Simmons on this team. His defense would be awesome on this team. There's no doubt about that. And Andrelton Simmons, a far cry from what we saw from Jorge Polanco this year. He is a top-notch defender at shortstop. But I think he's going to be a little beyond what they're looking for. But we'll get into that. So we start with the free agent catcher position. And the need here, basically, the Twins they're going to be bringing back Mitch Garver, of course. We figured out on the arbitration episode, he'll probably be making about $2 million around there in his first year of arbitration. So not too expensive, a pretty easy decision to bring him back after a bit of a lost season with the injuries and everything. He'll be trying to bounce back, but he's going to be fighting for playing time because Ryan Jeffers, of course, Twins Daily's Rookie of the Year, clearly the best rookie on the Twins. What a performance he had coming up and filling in that catcher spot. So the possibility would be that they're searching for a third sort of veteran catcher to complement these guys in some kind of mix of some sort of three-catcher rotation, or maybe a replacement for Garver in the event that he's traded. There's been some buzz around that. I think it's unlikely. Coming off the down year, it'd be trading really low. But David, I know you wrote at Twins Daily within the last couple of days about the 2021 catcher situation. So just since it's fresh in your mind, anything you want to sort of add to the setup here?
Yeah, well, I think that you kind of nailed it on the head, Nick. I think that when it comes to Twins catchers in 2021, when you look back at this year, there's a couple of things that stick out. One, like you mentioned, Ryan Jeffers is the catcher of the future, arguably the best potential young catcher that the Twins have had since Joe Mauer. Two, Mitch Garver was not good this year, but at the same time, in my opinion, it would be foolish to give up on him right now. And I expect him to be back in a Twins uniform next year. But by no means is that starting role guaranteed to him. And three, it's important for the Twins to have some type of veteran in that catching rotation. If that means having three catchers on the roster, then so be it, which I think there's a lot of benefits to, not only postseason wise this year, as we've seen from this year, obviously the postseason is much more condensed and the Twins didn't make it that far, but there's other benefits too. And especially with, Jeffers being a young catcher, having a veteran catcher like Avila was this year could be really beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, Mitch Garver obviously has the upside and he's shown it, right? A huge Silver Slugger year in 2019, but a question mark coming off what we saw in 2020. And Ryan Jeffers only 60 Major League plate appearances to his name. You just can't really count fully on either of these guys. So I think it's going to be important to, at the very least, bring some veterans into camp and have some guys around and some other options to set themselves up a little bit. So we're going to start diving in. We've all picked out a guy that we like, and we're going to start here with Andrew's pick. Andrew went with Stephen Voigt, who played for the Arizona Diamondbacks in the most recent season. He's 35 years old. He's a vet. Didn't have a great offensive season in the short season. I think that's going to be kind of a theme. Batted just 167 with a homer and 7 RBIs. But Andrew, why don't you tell us what you like about Stephen Voigt as a fit for the Twins?
Yeah, so my rationale here on this with going with a backup catcher, if you want to leave him there to supplement Garver and Jeffers, is the first thing. He's left-handed hitter. He has hit righties pretty well. He has a career OPS against right-handed pitching right around 760. But more importantly, with Vogt, for me, it was more of, I guess, like the intangible side. When you're signing a backup catcher, especially a third catcher, you're not really looking for a guy to carry an offense and give you a lot of production offensively. You want a guy that can be a veteran presence, help guide a young catcher in Ryan Jeffers, work with Mitch Garver to get even better behind the dish. And that's sort of the role I see Stephen Vogt playing. He's played that role very well. He's a great veteran presence, great clubhouse guy. He's a good leader. And I just think he would be a really good option to work alongside of Garver and Jeffers and help carry them through the season and provide a left-handed hitting option at the catcher position if they're facing a tough righty.
I like it. So I guess the thing that's nice too about is it Stephen Vogt? I say Voigt. I don't know. I see VOGT. I have no. Thank you for that. You know what? Hey, Vogt. There you go. Go vote in a week or two here, people. It's a good reminder, I guess. So the thing I like about him is he's coming off the rough season, and I think he's going to be pretty cheap. To get a guy with his track record, he didn't hit this year, but he's got certainly a track record of hitting. He's always been kind of an offense-first catcher, which is a nice compliment, especially if, Jeffers maybe hits a bit of a sophomore slump and Garver is not fully kind of back close to where he was. Nice to get a little more offense out of that position. As you mentioned, he's a vet. He's got a lot of experience. And the lefty thing, he complements what they've got pretty nicely in that regard. So I think my holdup with him is he's just the age, the waning athleticism, the inability to play other positions. Although one thing I do like about the three catcher setup is possibly having the ability to use Garver around the field a little more, maybe use him at first base and DH, especially if Nelson Cruz is gone. I think Garver could be a guy you could factor in there on a pretty consistent rotation against lefties. I don't know, David, you got any holdups with Stephen Vogt in your mind?
I think that, you brought up age. He's getting old. That's without a doubt, but that's not necessarily a holdup for me just because he would be fulfilling that role as a third catcher potentially. Obviously had a pretty crummy season this year, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's necessarily fair to completely judge him based off of a 160-game season. So I actually don't have that much to debate against Andrew on this one. Similarly, because my pick isn't too different than his.
Yeah, I think the Twins have a particular type they're looking for at this position, and there's a lot of different ways you could go that would not necessarily be wrong. As far as like a contract, any guess at what it takes to sign Stephen Vogt? Just here from the outset, Andrew?
It would probably be about a 1 year, maybe $2-3 million tops, and it's about what he was making in Arizona. I can't expect you to get a whole heck of a lot more than that.
Yeah, that sounds right. I see TF Twins, aka our guy, says bring back Bobby Wilson, cowards. Is he still around? I mean, hey, why not? He's still, he was very well liked guy in the clubhouse. All right,
actually, on my podcast with Cooper Carlson, we randomly talked about Bobby Wilson. His last year in the big league was with the Tigers, and he had like a negative 91 OPS plus. So
wow, okay, that's pretty close to what Mitch Garver had this year, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, moving on to the next here. David goes with Robinson Chirinos, another older veteran, 36 years old, played with the Mets most recently. A little bit of a better offensive season than Vogt had. 219, 242, 375 slash line, 1 homer and 7 RBIs. Chirinos, of course, has experience playing for contending teams. He was on the Houston Astros when they made their World Series run and played a fairly significant role there. The thing that I would like to hear you explain, though, David, is that this is a right-handed hitter and joining a mix with 2 righties. So give us the case for Robinson Chirinos and how he fits in with this rotation.
Yeah, well, you certainly bring up a good point, Nick, about he's a right-handed hitter, and the Twins could use a little bit less of that. But the reason I went with Chirinos is that, similar to Vogt, he had a lackluster year this past season compared to prior years. The 2 years before that, he hit 17 and 18 home runs, respectively, and he knows that role of a backup catcher very well. He's been on a variety of teams. Obviously ranging from Texas and some of their better days in the early, during the World Series runs, to Houston, as well as the Mets this year. And I think that when you look at him, given that he didn't have a great year this year, they'd be able to get him for fairly cheap. Right now he's signed, I believe, to roughly a $5.7 million deal with the Mets. Obviously the Twins would want to sign him for something cheaper than that. But I do think that role as a veteran is something that could be similar to what they had with Avila this year, except that Chirinos could have more production. I'm not one to say that the Twins should sign a stud catcher in this offseason because I think that you've got 2 catchers who have the potential to be very, very good at the plate and who aren't going to be awful on defense. I think Ryan Jeffers has the potential to be a good defensive catcher. Obviously, we've seen his offense, and also it's pretty darn cool watching him throw guys out from his knees. And we've seen what Mitch Garver can do, and obviously last year offense was not good, but we've seen it, and it could happen again.
Yeah, I think that, Chirinos is probably on the top end of the kind of caliber of player the Twins would seek at this position. And, as you mentioned, they have two really good guys locked in, and whoever signs here is going to have to do so with the acknowledgement that there's a good chance, you're going to see a Vila type playing time where it's like 1/3 of the team's games or maybe less. And, if Garver and Jeffers both look really good in spring training, there's a possibility the Twins just try to carry two catchers. So I don't know. I guess that's my main knock on Chirinos is I just think he's a little too good. I think he'll be a little too in demand. Andrew, what are your thoughts on Chirinos, and how would you sort of knock that case?
I just don't see where he fits. Like what you had touched on, Nick, you're adding a third right-handed hitting catcher. He is kind of the same type of player of Garver and Jeffers, just maybe not as good now as he's going, age 36. But I don't think you're really adding anything that makes the team different. If you bring in Chirinos, you might as well just roll with Garver and Jeffers and just keep the two right-handed hitting catchers.
Yeah. When you combine the price tag, I think he's going to have the highest price tag of any of the guys we're talking about here, just with the track record. But David, you make a great point about his willingness and familiarity with being a backup. I do think that that's important. My guy that I'm bringing up in this discussion is actually a former Minnesota Twin, a guy that we're pretty familiar with. I believe he was, in fact, the first free agent signing of the new front office regime when they took over in 2017. Or after the 2016 season. So Jason Castro, compared to the other guys on this list, he's a spring chicken. He's only 33, played for the Padres last year, had a pretty tough offensive season, although, not, again, relatively speaking, it was about the norm for this discussion, but batted 188, 293 OBP, 375 slugging, couple homers, 9 RBIs. I guess my thing with Jason Castro is he's a lefty, a good defender, a guy who has a good rep for working with pitchers, and a very known commodity around here. I think the Twins liked having Jason Castro around here. They felt there was a reason to make the switch, I guess, or maybe he was interested in going elsewhere, so they went with Avila. And I think those guys are pretty interchangeable. I would take Avila as well, who's also a free agent. I would take him back in a heartbeat if he's willing at a low cost. But I like the idea of Castro coming back, continuing to kind of help these guys with their framing and their defensive skills, bringing those along. And I think coming off this tough year in what's going to be kind of a tough market, I think you can get him fairly cheap and on the understanding that he's going to be very much a part-time player. David, what are your thoughts on Jason Castro? What would be your inhibitions in going that direction?
Yeah, well, this one's going to take, I was not a Jason Castro fan when he was here. But at the same time, it's tough to argue. He's a good defensive catcher, good pitch framer. Now if we see robot umps, that quality could become less valuable. But I could certainly see him in that role. I do think that I did not enjoy watching him with the Twins. He was not a great hitter, and he struggled in that sense. He struggled this year at the plate. Obviously, not a great sample size, but he's someone that I certainly think we talked about Chirinos earlier. Maybe he was too good. Jason Castro would certainly fit that role of third catcher because he's not at the level of Garver and Jeffers, even though Garver had a horrendous season this year.
Yeah.
Andrew, any thoughts on Jason Castro before we move on to the next position?
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate Jason Castro. He's a fellow Bay Area native. I like the fact that he's left-handed hitting. It's just his platoon splits aren't really that great. He's actually below average career-wise with his OPS against right-handed pitching. He doesn't add a whole bunch in terms of offense. I mean, I think go back to Stephen Vogt. Stephen Vogt gives you a better left-handed bat against right-handed pitching. But there's certainly nothing wrong with Jason Castro. He would fill that third catching spot really well. I would just prefer to see a guy like Stephen Vogt who has a little more upside with the bat in that position.
All right, that's a very fair argument, and that's a good point. You kind of sold me a little bit on Vogt's offensive upside, which I don't know if you're getting with either of these other guys. So, but ultimately, whether it's Avila, some other names have been brought up here, whether it's Bobby Wilson by Tom, or I see P. Schleisman says, is Sandy Leone a possibility? That's a guy who's been playing with Cleveland that I would suppose that Falvey's probably quite familiar with. Definitely a defense-first catcher, like almost a Drew Butera type, I would say, who, by the way, I think is also a free agent. Speaking of former Twins free agents, I don't know if he's going to be a realistic possibility. But yeah, Sandy Leon is a switch hitter. That doesn't really factor too much because he can't hit. But with guys that have shown they can hit in those first two spots, maybe having just a super defensive guy in Sandy Leon, does that interest you, David?
I'm not opposed to it, essentially because that third catcher spot isn't necessarily somebody who's going to be an offensive flair. Obviously, Leon has been with Cleveland too, so he knows the AL Central. And especially, you've got that connection with Falvey. Sure, why not?
Yeah.
Absolutely, it would be great to see somebody with a bat, but why not?
A lot of very palatable options here. Josiah says Kurt Suzuki. I'm going to pass on that. We talked earlier about the redundancy of right-handed bats, and I just don't see a reunion with Kurt really being a fit. Frank Frankly says Stephen Vogt sounds like the best of the bunch so far. Good work, Andrew. Seems you've made a good case. Maybe Yadier, he says. I mean, that would be really fun. God, it would be so fun. But something tells me that Yadier Molina is not going to come to Minnesota to be the third catcher here at this late stage of his career, unfortunately. Sealk says, I think I wouldn't sign a free agent catcher at all. Garver and Jeffers are fine together. With payrolls down, the money might be better spent elsewhere. No doubt about that. I don't think anyone's arguing that the Twins should make a super significant move at catcher. But like we mentioned, a lot of guys here, there's some guys in this mix who might end up having to take minor league deals. And so I think the Twins will definitely want to build up some depth at least going into camp. Switching gears here, we're going to go to free agent infielders. There could be two possible goals here. Well, there could be many, but two probably, more likely ones, which is A, they're going to find utility players to replace their departing depth. As we discussed last week, Marwin Gonzalez and Rayarticularza, both hitting the free agent market. So they are in this mix. Or, a notion that's being tossed around. I saw our guy Nash Walker wrote about it at Twins Daily today. What if you move Jorge Polanco coming off a tough year and not really showing great defense at shortstop into that utility role that maybe a guy like Marwin was filling this year, and find yourself a starting shortstop who is maybe a little more effective defensively, and maybe gives you a little sharper defense between Arias and Donaldson there. Either way, Marwin Gonzalez and Rayarticularza combined for 300 plate appearances this year, which was like 14% of the team's total plate appearances. So these, while they are backup utility man roles, if you will, they're a lot more significant than that sounds. So the Twins need to find some quality players to replace these guys. I don't think that going with Travis Blankenhorn out of the gate and I don't know, Nick Gordon, I guess, would be the only other option on the 40-man right now. I don't know if that's really going to fly for a team with championship aspirations. So let's dive in and take a look at some of these infielders. I think we're going to have some good names here. And we start with the name that everyone's been talking about. Everyone loves Kike Hernandez. From the Los Angeles Dodgers. Of course, he's in our minds right now because he's been having a phenomenal postseason. And he brings a lot to the table, as I'm sure Andrew, whose pick it is going to talk about. A switch hitter that hits lefties very well, which we know the Twins could use that after what we saw this year. Great defensive versatility. Kind of reminds me a lot of Marwin Gonzalez when they signed him, which I guess could be taken as a good or bad thing. But Andrew, we'll let you make your case. What do you like about Kike Hernandez for the Twins?
So he is actually just a right-handed hitter, but I love his versatility and how he can play everywhere in the diamond. The only place he hasn't played in a big league game is catcher, and he plays good defense no matter where you put him, in the outfield, anywhere on the infield. And I really just love how well he hits left-handed pitching. His career OPS against left-handed pitching is up in the 800 around 820 actually is where he's at career-wise there. And that's sort of what this team needs. Coming out of 2019, they hit really well against lefties. Last year, for whatever reason, they just didn't have the same production against left-handed pitching. So if you bring in a guy like Kike, who has a career track record of hitting really well against left-handed pitching, and I kind of see Kike really as being almost like an everyday kind of guy for this team. And he's really my number one priority right now in the offseason is to find a way to bring Kike to Minnesota. I think it's going to be very difficult. He's going to have a lot of demand. And, he may even end up staying in Los Angeles, I think is probably ultimately where he ends up. But I would really love to see him here. He just complements his team and makes him significantly better. And I guess one other really weird thing, and it's not Twins related, but I tweeted out in 52 at-bats against Bumgarner. He hits 500 against him in 52 at-bats.
Jeez. All right. Well, that's That's a decent sample to be hitting that with that kind of consistency. Jeez, that is an amazing.
That's why it blew my mind. Yeah.
Yeah,
Anyway.
against a pretty dang good pitcher. Not so much anymore. But yeah, Kike is. There's a lot, as we said, a lot to like about him, and he's been on that big postseason stage, which the Twins are trying to squad up. This is a 2019 postseason shirt that I'm wearing here. That one ended bad. This one ended bad. So the key for the Twins is getting over the hump. And Hernandez is a guy who's been there and had some experience. And who knows? Maybe Dodgers and Rays splitting 1-1 right now. Maybe he'll be pushing them over the hump here. David, what are your thoughts on Kike?
Yeah, well, I gotta agree with Andrew and the rest of Twins territory for the most part. I really like Kike. He's been fun to watch in the postseason. He can hit lefties really well. I think the only big question would be contract-wise. Would they be able to afford him? Right now, he's getting, I believe, $3.75 million this year with the Dodgers, and that is something that the Twins could sign him potentially. And that let's say we just talked about catchers. They don't spend as much on catchers. Get somebody lower in that sector, so you can get more money for Kike. I could certainly see that, but I'm all aboard the Kike train.
All right. Well, so you know what? I'm getting fact-checked live on the air by Andrew over here. You're just agreeing with him. I feel like I'm being ganged up on. This is ridiculous. I'm going to walk out of the room. The questions are too tough.
We're going to mute your mic.
I'll throw out some false accusations. I'll make up some fake news.
Okay. Well, you know what? It's hard to deny Kike as a fit. I guess my argument against him would be that he's so in vogue right now. I mean, all the Twins fans are talking about wanting him. He's having a big postseason. It tends to inflate a guy's value, maybe artificially. I look at Hernandez, and when I say he's similar to Marwin when the Twins signed him, in terms of his profile and attributes, yes, but even down to the fact that Marwin had like one good season out of his last 4 offensively, and he never got anywhere close back to that with the Twins. And Hernandez, really, when you look at his work, he's had like an OPS over 700, 720 like once in the last 4 years. So maybe good against lefties, but not a great overall offensive player. And as much as I think he can be a solid addition, I don't know if he's going to be worth the price at these limited funds that you have, to throw around. So I guess that would be the only real knock against him, but it's hard to make a real strong case against Kike. Let's move on to David's pick. David's top pick for the free agent infielders. By the way, if you are tuning in via any streaming platform, feel free to comment with your own thoughts on any of these players or anyone else you think the Twins should sign. We love to hear from you. David's going with Asdrubal Cabrera, 34-year-old, played for the Nationals last year, hit 242, 305, 447, 8 homers, 31 RBIs. Very solid offensive season. A guy who can play a few different positions in the infield. Much like Kike, he's got the big experience on the big stage. He was playing in the World Series when the Nationals won it last year. So let's hear your argument in favor of Asdrubal Cabrera, David.
Yeah, well, I've got 2 main points here. The first one for Asdrubal is that he batted this past season .314 against lefties. That's something that the Twins need in their lineup, and that they haven't seen this past year. And the other thing is, he is fairly inexpensive potentially. Right now, he's signed to a $2.3 million contract. I think that the Twins, since he is old, he's been in the league for a long time, they could get him for a little cheaper than that. And also, the guy knows the AL Central. He has played in the AL Central before, and so obviously that helps as well.
A great argument. I see Frankie says, is DJ LeMahieu going to be too expensive? Good bat and can play multiple positions. Short answer, yes. There's really nothing I'll say about that. He's going to get a huge contract, and I don't think the Twins are going to dive into the deep end in this offseason at any position. They kind of made their big splash with Donaldson, and they're going to be paying him for a while. Right. And, the story of this offseason, which we'll be talking about frequently, is that teams are going to be scaling back spending. The Twins, as we think they're going to go back 10 to 20%, probably something like that. I think that's going to be uniform around the league, if not more severe. And we're going to see that affect the free agent prices as well. So, as David mentioned, Asdrubal could be a fairly good price. I think, the Twins Daily and our little payroll spender tracker, which we'll dive into a little later here, we have him projected at like $4 million, which would be a pretty reasonable price for a guy who I think could replace a guy like Marwin pretty well. Again, here, I think it's just, is his price going to get too high? And you look at the age, possibly getting into that decline phase. And also, I just don't know about Asdrubal's defense at this point in his career. I don't think he was once a shortstop, not playing that anymore. More of a second baseman, third baseman, first baseman. So I want strong defense in the utility man. I don't know how strong Cabrera is on that front anymore. Andrew, what's your feelings about Asdrubal Cabrera?
Yeah, you kind of took it away from right there, Nick. Just the defense isn't there. The last time he played shortstop was in 2018. He played 31 innings there. So I question his defensive versatility. Really kind of second base, third base, first base. I don't even really trust him at second or third at this point. He is getting up there in age. I do like that he's a switch hitter. If anything, he would kind of be like my second utility infielder, just given his limited versatility and his age and where he's at in his career right now.
Agreed. But not a bad option by any means. A good one to bring here to the mix, David. And like you mentioned, a guy we're pretty familiar with. Moving on to my first pick among infielders, I'm going with Jurickson Profar. He is my Profar choice. That was really dumb, really bad. He's 27 still, only very young to be hitting the free agent market. Played with the Padres, as you can see him elbow bumping there with Manny Machado. And hit 278, 343, 428 with 7 homers and 25 RBIs. Good season. Jurickson Profar, formerly the unanimous #1 prospect in baseball as a young player. Took him a while to develop and certainly did not reach the level that his loftiest projections would have expected. But he's turned himself into, quite a good player and a versatile player. I think he's probably, among the options we're talking about here, going to be the most expensive. He's been a pretty much a full-time starter and a productive one at that, which begs the question of how interested he's going to be in a utility role, even though, as we discussed, there's not going to be any shortage of opportunities in this role, I don't think. Switch hitter, pretty good defender, and I think, at his age still has a little upside left, which is very intriguing to me. David, your thoughts on Jurickson Profar as a Twins target?
Yeah, I think he's young. He's got potential, and he's still at that point in his career where there's room to get better. He's only 27. I just think that price wise, he may be out of the Twins budget, and that's what it's going to come down to. Would love to see him in a Twins uniform, but just given that he is a highly touted player, I just don't know if that's reasonable, but would love to see him.
Yeah, Sean McGuire says yes on Profar, can still play shortstop. I don't know if that's true. I feel like he hasn't played it as much. He did come up as a shortstop originally, but he's mostly been a second baseman. That's more of a slam dunk if he can. We're going to talk about sort of that necessary element of a utility man that the Twins are going to bring in. Andrew, do you think that Jurickson Profar could still be trusted at shortstop, and what's your general feelings on him as a free agent target?
I think he could play shortstop. He is a good athlete, and considering we have Jorge Polanco at shortstop, who isn't a world-class defender, I think he could handle the position well enough on a spot start basis. Overall, I don't mind Jurickson Profar, but I kind of feel like with Jurickson, you're still paying for the name, right? Because he was #1 overall prospect in baseball. He's still only 27. So when you hear his name thrown around, you kind of, maybe he can still capture what made him the #1 prospect in baseball, and we can develop him into this superstar he was supposed to be. He just hasn't really been that. So I feel like you're overpaying for a guy that isn't going to reach what we thought he was going to reach. And offensively, he's decent, but he's not really that great. Just last year, according to Baseball Savant, the things he did really well was not striking out and not whiffing. But when he puts the ball in play, he's not really hitting it that hard. His hard hit rate was way down. Exit velocity was down. And so it's just, I don't really know what you're really going to get from him on a high price tag because he was once #1 prospect in baseball.
Wow. Andrew did his Oppo research here clearly. Great points. And I think that is the most solid argument against him, is that the price tag could just be a little too much. As you mentioned, he's got the name. He's young enough that teams might have these visions of what they can still make of him. But I do think that, we've talked about the urgency of getting a backup or sort of roaming infielder or whatever you want to call it. But with Josh Donaldson coming off a almost totally lost, not almost, but he missed about half the year. And now there's just these big question marks about his calf going forward. Jorge Polanco getting ankle surgery for the second straight offseason. He was hobbled all year. Lisa Rise, who is not getting surgery apparently, but was very hobbled all year. And it looks like this knee is going to be kind of an ongoing issue maybe. I really think it's important, and I would invest. We've got him projected at like $9 million at Twins Daily, Jurickson Profar for next year. And I realize you got to make some sacrifices in terms of the bullpen and starting pitching possibly, but I'm willing to do that. I think this is a really important role to lock down. So I like Jurickson a lot, and if he's interested in coming here, I'd be good all for it. So you guys in the comments are kind of predicting some things that are coming here. I noticed. I see P. Schleisman says, an Adrianza fan. Strong D, didn't get many chances, I feel. Any thoughts? I feel he has the tools. And next on our list here, it's one A-Ray Adrianza. That's Andrew's pick. So a Twins free agent, a player who was on the Twins this year, but he is going to be out there in that free agent pool, a guy that we're pretty familiar with. We talked about him a little bit in the free agents episode last week, coming off a very, very tough year, career worst OPS, no homers, 3 RBIs. He got a fair amount of time because just like Gonzalez, he had to fill in for these injured guys, but it was just a tough year, which I think this might be part of your point here, Andrew, could keep him pretty dang affordable and easy to bring back. And, as much as we're talking about filling that Gonzalez role, that kind of top utility role, I do think the Twins are going to want to have probably 2 utility guys, 2 backup infielders. And the bottom line is they need someone who can play shortstop well. So far, I don't know that we've discussed anyone like that. So with that, Andrew, let's hear you make the case for A-Ray coming back.
You kind of has made a case for me there, Nick. And really, my thing with A-Ray is, I guess, so my first pick on infield was Kike Hernandez, which was kind of more of the offensive pick, the guy who can crush left-handed pitching and really supplement the offense. Whereas with A-Ray, it's more of just a really solid defender who can play anywhere on the infield and play really good defense. You're not going to bring back A-Ray Adrianza because of his bat. I mean, he's been with Minnesota for a while. Now he's been in the league for a while, and he's never really done much offensively. He's always kind of been a below league average hitter, but for a guy that fills the role of being just a solid defender, utility infielder, that's fine. That's the role A-Ray plays, and this team needs that even for a late, with Josh Donaldson in his cap situation. If you want to get him off his feet after his last at bat, you bring in A-Ray to play defense, and you're not missing anything. And so that's sort of the role that I feel A-Ray plays really well, and there's definitely a need for that on this team.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you. I've mentioned before that I was pretty like, let's move on from Adrianza. I felt like kind of done with him this year. But the more I think about it, as your second utility man, you mentioned you're not signing him for his bat, but I have no question that Adrianza is a better hitter than we saw this year. He improved at the plate each of his first 3 years with the Twins. He was actually pretty solid offensively. He was almost an average hitter in 2019. And for a cheap utility guy who can play shortstop, that's pretty nice. Ron says second utility man fits A-Ray, spend the money elsewhere. So it sounds like he's on board. David, are you on board? Do you want to bring back Adrianza again?
Yeah, I think that second utility man has got A-Ray Adrianza's name all over it. I do think that, this year he didn't hit well. He's never been a star hitter by any means. But he does fill that role well, and he's not big of enough of a liability in the field where he's worth replacing. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, I'm with you. It was a good choice, Andrew, because it's hard to knock it too much. It's very logical, and there's a good case to be made. Seems Sean is kind of in the same boat. He says we need 2 utility players, one that can hit and spell injured players, the Marwin role, but not Marwin. I think we're all agreed on that. You're not going to see anyone making a case to bring Gonzalez back here. And a second to play with shortstop with strong defensive chops. Unfortunately, A-Ray's D seems to have regressed with his bat. It seemed okay to me. I don't know. He wasn't sensational this year, but I thought he still handled it.
I believe, maybe I'm misquoting this here, but I believe in terms of the infielders last year, he led the team in outs above average on the infield.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, A-Ray is still a really good defender.
The sample makes it tough, but I think there's no question he was their best defensive shortstop by quite a long shot. And if Polanco was to go down, I could live with Adrianza filling in for a decent period of time. But he is getting up there in age. I mean, he's suddenly 31. He was kind of a youngish player when the Twins acquired him, but that was a while ago now. So Adrianza reunion is definitely a possibility on the table, and I think maybe a fairly likely one if the Twins can bring him back in that like $1 million range, which is about where we have him projected. Another guy who the comments wanted to bring in, it was Mr. Matthew Taylor, another OG Matthew Taylor, another frequent guest on Offseason Live and the Postgame Pint. Talk about my boy, Tommy Listella, 827 OPS over the last 2 years, 5% Ks, left-handed bat to spell Sano and Josh Donaldson. Is he given a little bit of the case for why you like Tommy Listella as a target, David?
He is. Our guy Matthew just nailed it on the dot. Tommy Listella is rock solid. He's someone that over the past couple seasons has just batted very well, high average, low strikeouts, and he could be. We talk about that top utility spot with Adrianza being in that second spot. Listella could be that top guy. He's not ridiculously expensive. I believe right now he's signed to a 1 year, $3.25 million. And so that's something that I think it's important for the Twins to have a utility guy who can hit the ball, like one of the comments that we just spoke about. And I think Listella could certainly play that role. Now he hasn't been amazing against lefties, but still he's strong enough of a hitter, I think. And he's got experience in the league where I think that he'd be a valuable asset.
Yeah, I looked it up. I think that'd be one thing that would kind of turn people away at first, the left-handedness, just because it really seems like we're trying to bring in some righty bats and sort of offset the weakness that we saw against lefties this year. But to the point that Matthew made, it'd be nice to have a lefty guy who can play first and third and spell the two righties there, especially with those guys both having been pretty injury prone. And Tommy Listella, I looked it up, not a really extreme platoon split. I think he's got a OPS above 700 in his career against lefties. So my concern here is just going to be kind of the same as it was with Kike, and to an extent, I guess, Profar, who, even though he was mine, I just think he might be too expensive. His star is on the rise. He's a guy that I know Oakland, who traded for him midway through the last season, spoke very glowingly of. They want to bring him back. So I guess that I like Tommy Listella as a player, and I think having a guy who you could trust to be your regular third baseman and second baseman is pretty important with what we know about Arias and Donaldson right now. So I don't know, Andrew, what's your vibe on Tommy Listella?
You guys kind of touched on the left-handed aspect of it, so I won't talk about that one. I guess my biggest concern, other than that, with Listella is, for most of his career, like Tommy has been a pretty good player. And then he burst onto the scene in 2019. He had that really spectacular first half with the Angels, all-star, has the injury, comes back this year, has another pretty good year, but he is already 31 years old. And so when I look at a guy who's now over 30 and bursts onto the scene within the last 3 years, I kind of question how sustainable is that success going to be as he gets into age 33, 34. Or the guy like Tommy, you're going to have to give him a multi-year deal. You can't get him on a 1 year deal. He's going to be very highly sought after on the market. And so I kind of feel that might not work out well for the Twins, signing a guy like Tommy Listella at age 31 to a 3 to 4 year deal.
Yeah, he is. And it might be an inflated price, as we just discussed. Ron says he will cost too much to be a part-time player. He will get paid this year. Yeah, he's a guy who's got a buzz around him coming into this offseason. And I think that is kind of the case against him, is that he might have a little too much buzz. And as you mentioned, signing guys at this 31, age 32 to multi-year deals can be a little bit of a hazardous proposition. It's one thing I really like about Jurickson Profar, still young enough that you're kind of still getting some of that prime window, but you're also paying for it. So Listella, a good and interesting name to look at, and a guy who's going to be sought after, I think, pretty highly on this market. The last guy that we brought to the table here as a player we like, I'm going a little outside the box here, and I'm going to go with Freddie Galvez, formerly with the Cincinnati Reds, still only 30 years old, batted .220 last year, 308 OBP, 404 slugging, 7 homers and 16 RBIs. He's a undisciplined hitter with some good power, a pretty decent hitter, I think, and above all, he's a shortstop. I mean, this guy is a natural shortstop. The defensive numbers were poor this year in a very small sample, but he was on the elite end of outs above average the 2 years before that. So I think he's a pretty high quality defensive shortstop and a guy who, frankly, I mean, we'll see what happens with Polanco next year, but I would not be opposed to having Galvez maybe take over that starting shortstop job, move Polanco into a utility role, kind of like Nash, kind of like some other people have been discussing, and maybe have that be the interim setup until Royce Lewis hopefully is ready to step in at whatever time that he is. I just like we've talked about, you need to bring in a shortstop, and obviously Rayarticularza could fill that, but not going to be any kind of standout shortstop. And with guys like Didi Gregorius are not going to be in the Twins price range, I think Galvez gives you a chance to get a true shortstop who plays the position defensively and has a little offensive firepower. So, Andrew, I'll let you start. Take a shot.
I'm not a big fan of Freddie Galvez's bat. His career OPS is below 700. He's never had an OPS plus that's even reached 100. His career OPS plus is somewhere in the low 80s. His defense isn't that great. I do like that he's a shortstop. There's not enough there offensively that I'm kind of like, I really want Freddie Galvez. I feel like the perception of his offensive abilities is better than what he's actually done. And that's just where I'm at on. Yeah. Probably fair. It does seem like he has a rep. I mean, he's been an everyday player, and that might be a reason why it's going to be tough to pull him away. If you're not able to promise that kind of playing time. David, what's your feelings on Freddie Galvez? What do you see as the shortcomings in that plan?
Yeah, well, I agree that he's that next step down from Didi Gregorius, and potentially within the Twins price range, but. I agree with Andrew in the sense that I don't know if he is good enough, both offensively, to take that everyday role as shortstop. I'm fine with Galvez. I think that he's a good defensive player, and certainly Polanco was not this year, and has proven that's the weakest part of his game in the past. But I don't know if I don't want to call him overrated because he's a good player, but I just don't know if he is somebody that would be ready to start over Polanco, but certainly in a utility role.
Maybe you bring him into camp and see how everyone looks and figure it out, right? I mean, Polanco, once again, coming off ankle surgery, it didn't seem like he really responded to it very well last offseason, but hopefully it takes a little better this season because Polanco sure looked like he was swinging one-legged a lot of the time this year, and the Twins need him to be putting a little more of a jolt into the ball if he's going to be their regular starter. So if you're watching this and any of these arguments struck out to you, if they did that, or if they stood out to you, feel free to share which guy you like best here that's been discussed. Feel free to submit any other names that you like. I see our guy Tom has been campaigning for Jose Iglesias in the comments here. He says Jose Iglesias this year hit 373, 400, 556. That is a 956 OPS in 150 plate appearances. That's a very small sample, but that is a stunning offensive line from Jose Iglesias, who has been a career-long kind of defensive shortstop, no-hit guy. Since June 1st, 2019, Iglesias has a 102 adjusted runs created plus. Polanco is a 92. Insert big eyes emoji. Iglesias has an option, but he's not sure that Baltimore is willing to spend $3.5 million on him. Probably not. I don't know why the Orioles would do that. So not a guy that we've discussed, but I think a good option, and maybe, if I'm being honest, probably a better option than Freddie Galvez if he's available on the market. Ron says there are quite a few good shortstops on the market. Sign one and move Polanco to utility. I think that's going to be maybe a fairly popular idea here. So let's, as we kind of wrap it up here, one thing I want to do is take a look at maybe how some of these signing scenarios would impact the payroll picture. So what we have been doing at Twins Daily is we created a site called twinspayroll.com. Our guy Matthew, who spoke up earlier, is one who helped us put that together. And basically it's just like a little spreadsheet where you can kind of create your own team, see the impacts on payroll. We've got a bunch of options listed, including a bunch of the guys we've been discussing here tonight. So I'm going to pull that up, and we'll take a look and see at what some of these moves might do. So I've sort of set it up here. You can see we've got the budget set at $125 million, which is a 10% drop from 2020. I think that's maybe somewhat on the optimistic side, but fairly realistic. You can, if you're in here, you go to twinspayroll.com, you can choose different sort of thresholds and try to work within them. So what I've done here is gone with a fairly conservative approach outside of these positions. We let Rosario go in arbitration. We're paying Kirilloff the minimum at $600K. We're going to try to keep Cruz for $14 million. We got Cave filling that fourth outfielder spot. We've got Dobnak and Smeltzer in the fourth and fifth rotation spots, which probably is not what a lot of people want. Kept Rogers, brought back Clippard, Thielbar, So a fairly cheap rotation. We've got about 14 mil to work with to fill these spots. So if you went on the top end, a guy like Profar, who I like, and we've got him at 9 million, and then maybe go with, let's say, Adrianza for that other spot here. And Jeffers, you can stay under the threshold. You know, you got about 3 million left to spend, but again, that leaves you with Dobnak and Smeltzer. So I think what we want to try to do here is we're either going to have to come to terms with the fact that Cruz is going for a cheaper option, or we're going to have to probably go cheaper than Profar. You can knock it down to a Kike Hernandez or a Tommy Listella. We've got them around 7.5. Gives you a couple more mil there. You know, not too bad. You know, another guy we discussed, Galvez, around 5. So as you can see, as you go down the scale with that first spot, you give yourself a little more flexibility. And if you take out a Cruz for a Rooker, you've got quite a bit of flexibility. So one thing we've kind of discussed is that Nelson Cruz is such a big crux point in this offseason. As you look at this kind of layout here, Andrew and David, as my cat blocks my light here, what do you kind of see as the ideal sort of approach? How much do you want to spend in that first utility spot? And, you know, I think we're all kind of in agreement. You got to go cheap. You got to go like an Adrianza or possibly like a Blankenhorn in the second spot. And then are you interested in spending any kind of money at catcher? You know, or are we just kind of going to go with a minor league deal, maybe a $1 million deal for a guy like Stephen Vogt? David, what do you come away from this discussion feeling like is the right approach at these positions?
Yeah, well, I think it's all about pecking order. And I think that for the Twins, that top utility spot is a crucial part to their offensive, but also defensive lineup and roster. So I think, yes, you go with somebody cheap at catcher. And for that second utility role, you go with somebody cheap as well. You re-sign Adrianza, or you bring up Blankenhorn for good. But I think that you put all your marbles in that top utility role. Get somebody potentially up to, you know, 7, 8, 9 million. Because when you look at Twins offseason transactions this year, that is going to be a crucial role. Obviously, I think that I love Eddie Rosario, but I think there will be there's going to be an opening in the outfield, as well as potentially a DH. I won't talk too much about that. But, you know, I think that certainly that top utility role is going to be important, and somebody like Listella would be nice. Galvez, like you talked about, a little cheaper, but we'll see.
And so I think we're all in agreement that the Twins need to probably do something at, you know, the starting rotation, those last two spots. I think they need to bring back at least one Jake Odorizzi, Marcus Stroman type, you know, maybe in that 10 to 12 million range. That's going to take a big chunk of that payroll. They need to do something in the bullpen. They need to try to maintain the strength that was their pitching, because it was so key to them this year. So when it comes down to it, are you on board with the idea that going pretty heavily investing in that utility role is probably going to cost you Nelson Cruz?
Golly, you're making me think on the spot here. Good golly. You know, at the end of the day, I didn't even factor in starting pitching when you mentioned that, and I would much rather see them bring in. I would rather see them bring in somebody like Stroman to add to that rock solid rotation than to spend 9 million or even 7 million. So maybe a guy like Galvez, who I think we had as 5 million on the payroll, or somebody in that middle range would be better, because it's still good to have somebody that is an impact player at that role, because like you said earlier this year, you know, Marwin and Adrianza had 14% of the teams at bats. You know, it's not like that's just it's not like that's somebody who's going to be riding pine all day long. And it is important that they get somebody good, but I do think that I'd like to keep Cruz.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, what these conversations really spell out is that tough decisions lie ahead. And, you know, it's like you said, man, it's pecking order. You really got to set your priorities and determine what matters to you. I think, to me, if you can get a young, pretty solid guy on that Profar level, that Kike level, I would prioritize that over bringing back Nelson Cruz for a year. I'm sorry. It's just you got to have somewhat of a long-term outlook. And I'm not super confident Cruz continuing to hit at the level that he has. Andrew, what's as you look at kind of this whole picture that we just broke down, what do you walk away with thinking is the way the Twins need to allocate their money, and how aggressively should they be addressing these positions?
Yeah, so when I put that together, I went a little more emphasis on pitching. I brought back Jake Odorizzi and then Drew Smiley for that fifth spot. I kind of feel like they need that lefty in the rotation. Smiley didn't have a ton of appearances last year, but when he was on the mound, he did pitch well. He'd be about, I think, like 4 million is what we have him on there. And then I went with Kirilloff in left and Rooker DH. And then I got Kike in there. So you go Kike and then Adrianza, Kirilloff, Rooker. And then you got, like, I think Lamont Wade as your fourth outfielder. Bullpen remains pretty much the same. Bring back Clipper, bring back Rogers. And that kept us under the $125 million mark. And I think that could certainly be, the option they go. Like you had touched on with Cruz, it's really hard to look at a guy who's going to be, 42 and say, I'm going to pay you $14 million at age 42 and think that he's going to go hit over 300 with 40 home runs and 100 RBIs. Like, the last guy to do that at that age was Barry Bonds. So, like, Nelson Cruz is good, but he's also not Barry Bonds.
Yeah.
And I just don't think it makes sense to pay Nelson Cruz that kind of money at where he's at now. And they can get really good production from guys like Kirilloff and Rooker for just over $1 million for the two of them combined. And I think that's ultimately where they're going to go.
Yeah. I talk to people, and it's like there's just this – people can't fathom the idea that Cruz is not going to be an amazing hitter, and I get it because he's been so good. But as you mentioned, Barry Bonds is one of the only players in Major League history, literally, that has hit at this age, at any kind of truly solidly above average level. It becomes a very rare company. So covering a few of the last comments we got here, Ron says there are only a few good shortstops on the market. Sign one and move Polanco to utility. I think we mentioned that one already. Ron says Polanco is only getting. Cat's going psycho. Polanco's only a little over $4 million. If you're going to spend over $7 million for utility, get a good shortstop instead. Not a ton of shortstop options out there, as we mentioned, but not a bad idea. Josiah says, weird idea. If you can't bring back Cruz, how about a trade for JD Martinez? I've heard some people bring that up. I don't know. That's interesting.
A lot of money.
Silk says, Marlon was fourth on the Twins in PAs this year. I prefer a good player who you're comfortable with playing regularly over Cruz. The Twins will find someone who can play DH. I think, as we kind of wrap up this discussion, that is the upshot of getting a catcher who you can put on the roster. It gives you the opportunity to use a guy like Garver, rotate him through that DH spot. And if he bounces back, that's a good right-handed bat to replace some of Cruz's production. If you get a good infielder, a guy like Jurickson, a guy like Kike, who you like their bat, that's a guy who can also rotate through that DH spot. So you find ways to replace some of that production, I think, and it all kind of comes together. That's what I like about flexibility at DH.
No, one more thing, too, on Kike, like, he's actually on Baseball Reference. He's listed as a center fielder. And Kike's played a lot of time in the outfield. And just given Byron Buxton's history, there's probably a pretty good chance they're going to want to get him some days off, right? And so you could even put Kike in center field and you leave Max in right. And, Kike also has that ability to play a really good outfield as well, not just an infielder.
Yeah. There's a lot of flexibility that comes about. We've specifically kind of zeroed in on guys who can play some different positions. A guy like Profar can play the outfield too. I mean, some of these guys give you that flexibility as well. So I think that's going to be the key. The Twins are going to be looking for a veteran catcher who can come in and maybe help some of these young guys, and Garver coming off a question mark. And they're going to be looking for some just flexibility, guys who can fill in multiple spots, because the Twins, unfortunately, are going to have some question marks around the infield coming into next year. Cruz are a starting good pitcher, Ron says. Pitcher makes the Twins better team. We have hitters to somewhat replace Cruz, but no one to upgrade over Smeltzer or Dobnak. So that's a good way to let you guys know that we've got plenty more free agent coverage coming for you next week. We're going to be covering DH and outfield in our next episode. So we'll be talking about potential replacements for Nelson Cruz and Eddie Rosario. That's a lot of production to replace. Both those guys might be gone. And then we'll talk starting pitching. As you mentioned, I don't know if we want to go with Dobnak and Smeltzer, so we probably want to go find a little more pitching help on that market. And the following week, we'll be talking about relief pitching. So every Tuesday and Thursday night, we're doing Offseason Live at Twins Daily. You can find articles on the site with a schedule. You can always find the on-demand versions of these episodes on YouTube. You can subscribe to our podcast and get the audio version. There's all kinds of ways to find this content. But we love when you guys tune in live. We love when you comment and share your thoughts and help guide the discussion. So thank you so much to everyone who participated. Really appreciate y'all tuning in. Thank you very much to David. David, let's, as signing off here, who is your number one favorite target we talked about? Who is the number one guy you want the Twins to get?
That is the $1 million question, and I got to go. Couple million. I got to go with Tommy Listella. I really like Tommy Listella.
That would be an exciting addition.
He's an electric player, and he's a fun guy to cheer for. Thomas Frank Listella from New Jersey. Probably has some Italian roots. Gotta love it.
All right. And Andrew, as we sign off here, who's your number one guy you want to make sure we get out of this group? Who are you pursuing the hardest?
The Mad Bum Crusher, Kike Hernandez. That's my guy.
All right. Ron says thank you. Thank you, Ron. Thank you to everyone who tuned in to Offseason Live. Make sure to swing by twinspayroll.com if you want to create your own payroll. Go to Twins Daily if you want to read all kinds of content from these guys and the rest of our amazing writing stable. And tune in next week for Offseason Live, and we'll be diving into a bunch more free agents. Thank you, everybody, and go Twins.
Win Twins.